Looking forward to hearing this. We've got Hardik Parekh, who's going to be talking about navigating DevOps security journey into OWASP SAMM. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Hardik.
Hi, everyone. In today's DevOps era, there is increasing pressure to speed up time to market. To meet this demand, organizations are relying on increasing number of tech stacks, deployment models, and open source software without clear security requirements. It would be an understatement to say that modern software is growing in complexity. As a result, 75% of vulnerabilities are application related. Yet, there is no prescriptive and measurable way to analyze and improve software assurance posture for organizations. To address these challenges, we recently released OWASP SAMM 2.0. My name is Hardik Parekh, and I'm here to share my knowledge about how to navigate DevOps security journey at scale with OWASP Software Assurance Maturity Model 2.0. Before we do that, I wanted to share a little bit about myself. I started my career as a software engineer, like many of you guys, and I got an opportunity to lead various security teams and programs at medium and large corporations like Dell, EMC RSA, Intuit, Amazon, and Splunk. I'm also on advisory boards for a few security and data privacy startups and a nonprofit trade organization, CompTIA, which issues IT security certifications such as Security Plus and CISA Plus. Throughout my career, I contributed to industry through various safe code publications, Science Top 25 Programming Errors, CVSS version 3.0, BSIMM since its very first version, and OWASP SAMM, as well as most recently NIST SSDF. For those of you who might not be familiar with BSIMM, BSIMM is another software security maturity model which is descriptive in nature. It was developed by Cigital by interviewing 6 independent software vendors from Safe Code founding member companies, and EMC was one of them when I was leading a product security team there. It is more of a descriptive model of what activities other security organizations are performing at each maturity level versus prescriptive model, which SAMM is. So the difference between BSIMM and SAMM is mainly, while BSIMM is more of a descriptive model, SAMM is more of a prescriptive model, which tells you exactly what you should be doing at each level of maturity while building your software security assurance program. I started contributing to OWASP SAMM back in 2016 and have been co-author and one of the core members of OWASP SAMM project ever since then. Now, before we start the talk, I would like to get some legal stuff out of the way. I'm not speaking on behalf of my current or previous employers, nor am I here as a representative of my current or previous employers. My opinions are solely my own, and they do not reflect those of my current or any of the previous employers. A quick agenda. I assume many of you might not be familiar with OWASP SAMM, so I'll spend some time introducing OWASP SAMM, covering what is SAMM, why do we need a model like SAMM, core principles of SAMM, and the project history. After that, I'll go over changes we introduced in SAMM version 2.0 or 1.5. And last, we'll discuss how to apply SAMM in your organization to navigate DevOps security journey at scale to build a software assurance program. Now, if you have one of these 15 plus roles, you'll be able to take valuable information from this talk and apply to your organization starting from Monday. Now let's start look at what is SAMM. OWASP SAMM is one of the flagship OWASP projects. Flagship status is given to projects with strategic importance to both OWASP and AppSec in general. OWASP SAMM is a framework for software assurance that provides effective and measurable way for all types of organizations to analyze and improve their software security posture that is tailored to specific risk facing that particular organization. SAMM is full of useful resources that will help with evaluating an organization's current security practices, providing recommendations or suggestions for growing and maturing those practices, providing a way to demonstrate concrete improvements over a period of time, and defining and measuring security activities throughout the life cycle. One of the big benefits of SAM is that it is a vendor agnostic. SAM can be done in-house, or you could have one of the several AppSec consulting firms help you with the assessment and creating plans and roadmaps. Now, why do we need a model like SAM? As we discussed earlier, in quest to increase speed, today's organization is growing in complexity without any clear security requirements, which result into almost 75% of vulnerabilities are application specific. Now, if you look at latest security breaches like Equifax or Capital One, they are more application related. They are not perimeter centric. To standardize security activities in such a complex software environment, we need a model like OWASP SAMM. I like this quote from George Box, who has been called one of the great statistical minds of 20th century. The most that can be expected from any model is that it can supply a useful approximation to reality. All models are wrong, and some models are useful. I repeat, all models are wrong, and some models are useful. The point is that you can't find a model that is exactly describe the reality. There are too many variables in real life. But you can have a model that is close enough to be useful and close enough to reality. And that is what SAM is aspiring to be. Now, SAM was defined with flexibility and versatility in mind, such that it can be utilized by small startups, mid-sized organizations, as well as large business corporations, using any style of development methodology, be it agile, DevOps, waterfall. It is a development methodology agnostic. Additionally, this model can be applied organization-wide for a single line of business or even an individual project. SAM is both measurable and actionable. It defines maturity levels across business functions and provides clear-cut pathways for improving the maturity levels, thus providing step-by-step navigation plan to achieve higher levels of maturity. Now, let's look at the project history. For those of you who might not be familiar with SAM, the very first version of SAM was originally actually created through an open SAM project led by Praveer Chandra, an independent software security consultant. After a number of years, it being in kind of dormant state, in around approximately 2015, a small group get together at OWASP and work together to breathe some life into this project. And it became OWASP project. The version 1.1 of OWASP SAMM expanded and restructured its predecessor into the 4 complementary resources: the core document, the how-to guide, the quick start guide, and a toolbox, which is kind of like a spreadsheet that provides simple automation for data collection, metrics, and graphs. Back in 2017, we released version 1.5 of SAM, which incorporates a refinement of the scoring model to provide more granularity to the existing scoring assessment. We recently launched SAM 2.0 in February 2020, where we have changed the measurement model one more time to add qualitative measurement to represent how well an organization is performing a particular security practice. In addition, we made several structural changes to SAM as well. As a result, SAM 2.0 is not backward compatible. So for the folks who are using SAM 1.5, SAM 2.0 is not backward compatible. Please keep that in mind. Now, SAM is built on a few core principles. The first one is organizations' behavior changes slowly over time. Changes need to be smaller and iterative to really take hold and make a real difference from security perspective. The second, there is no single recipe that works for all organizations. SAM is built with this in mind and supports an organization building a program that is tailored to their risk profile, their culture, and their existing level of maturity when it comes to security. The third, guidance related to security activities must be prescriptive. Many times, security initiatives fail due to poor details, lack of communication, or invalid assumptions. Overall, the success of the program will be based on being simple, well-defined, and measurable. Let's take a look at maturity levels and the assessment scores, and how do we calculate them. SAM is defined in three levels of maturity: ad hoc provision, increased efficiency, and comprehensive mastery at scale, mainly through the automation. Unlike other maturity models such as BSIMM and SAM predecessors itself, there are four levels of assessment scores for each security activity, which make fine-grained improvements even more visible. No implementation, implementation across few or some projects, implementation across at least half projects, and implementation across many and most projects. Now, not everyone needs to make level 3 in all areas. Similar to Six Sigma or CMMI, the goal is not to max out on each and every practice. Honestly, that wouldn't even be a good use of your limited resources. We all struggle with limited budget and limited resources, whether it's a small startup or a large corporation. So in that environment, we do not recommend to max out on each and every area and achieve level 3, especially not in the first attempt. What the target maturity should be for your organization is largely up to you, and that depends on business drivers and risks that your organization is facing. For example, if you are in a financial space, there are different risk profile. If you are e-commerce website, there's totally different risk profile. And if you are holding customer data, there's a very different risk profile. But if you are none of that, then your risk profile will be very different. Your business drivers are different. Some companies, their business drivers are also focused on certain compliance aspects. And all of these various formations, they kind of like play a very important role in setting aside your target maturity level. In 1.5, we have modified the scoring model to provide multiple choice answers to allow for more accurate assessment. Previously in SAM and most of the models, the questions were yes and no, which is great from academic perspective, but in real world, we know that answer many times lies in between the two. For example, when you try to answer the following question for education and guidance at level 2 of SAM assessment, are those involved in the development process given role-specific security training and guidance? You know you have trained some of the developers and would like to train some project managers and testers. But given the question, would you answer yes or no? The dilemma here is if you answer yes, then you will have challenges getting budget for your next iteration because you already said, yeah, you're already doing this. So there is no incremental value that you're going to bring. But at the same time, if you answer no, it's not correct because you already trained some of the roles, not all of them. So that is where we introduce this more fine-grained measurement level for 1.5. Now, based on user feedback, there are still some areas where we wanted to improve SAM from where it used to be. So as a result of the feedback from the community, we have made changes to the measurement model yet again. In SAM 2.0, we are assessing the activities along two axes: coverage by means of questions and quality by means of mandatory criteria. Now, I don't want to go too much into detail on this slide. This is just a quick snapshot of SAM 1.5. So you understand what changes we are making in 2.0. Now, SAM is defined in three different levels. At highest level, SAM 1.5 defined 4 critical business functions. Each business function has 3 security practices, and each security practice has 3 levels of maturity. One would ask, what are the motivations behind a new version? So there are 5 main motivations behind coming up with the new SAM version. First, align with recent development methodologies such as agile and DevOps to make it development methodology agnostic. Version 1.5 and its predecessors look more suitable for waterfall development methodology, even though it was not meant to be. So we realize that it's missing key aspects of guidance in terms of how to securely build and deploy software, especially since CI/CD has become an integral part of agile DevOps methodology. Second motivation is to improve the measurement. As I discussed earlier, even though 1.5 addressed the feedback about granular levels, it still didn't address the question how well an activity is being performed, thus needing some qualitative measurement criteria. The third is to avoid orphaned or unrelated activities. There are quite few security activities in SAMM 1.5 that were defined such that it lacked consistent theme across different levels of maturity within a security practice, which also resulted in a few orphan activities such as code signing. So it was funny that code signing was at maturity level 2, but there wasn't anything related to code signing at maturity level 1, and there wasn't anything at maturity level 3 for code signing. Thus, it felt like code signing is kind of like more like an orphan activity dangling at level 2. The fourth motivation was to arrange maturity levels in increasing order of difficulty. Other shortcoming of 1.5 and its predecessor was that sometimes security activities at higher level were easier to implement compared to the security activities at lower levels, which really didn't make sense. The fifth and the last motivation was to improve the production process. SAMM production process was itself slow and waterfall, resulting in major overhaul every time we wanted to create a new version. As a result, we felt the need to come up with a new version, and hence SAMM 2.0 came to light. This is SAMM 2.0 framework at very high level. And the areas highlighted are changes from SAMM 1.5, which we'll cover in a few minutes. SAMM 2.0 is defined in three different levels. At the highest level, SAMM defined 5 critical business functions instead of 4. Each business function is a category of activities related to the nuts and bolts of software development. For each business function, SAMM defines 3 security practices. And each security practice is an area of security-related activities that build assurance for the respective business function. For each security practice, SAMM defines 3 maturity levels as an objective. And each level within a security practice is characterized by successively more sophisticated objective and even more stringent success metrics than the previous levels. Overall, as you increase the level of maturity, you should expect higher cost of implementation. If you look at the framework, you can see that governance is more focused on the program itself, looking at the more strategic elements, strategy and metrics, policy and compliance, education and guidance, etc. We have renamed construction business function into design and introduced a new business function implementation. Now, design, implementation, verification, operations, they cover the whole software development lifecycle. Design is focused on threat assessment and security requirements during earlier phases. Implementation is focused on secure build, secure deployment, and defect management aspects. Verification is more focused on testing and verifying aspects. And operations is focused on incident detection and management and environment management where the app lives on. SAMM 2.0 core model, when we look at the little bit closer look at the SAMM 2.0 core model, let's look at some of the security practices. Each security practice is divided into 2 streams, stream A and stream B. The purpose of these streams is to align and link activities within the practice over different maturity levels. Each stream has an objective to be reached, and this objective can be reached in increasing level of maturity. This way, we ensure that there are no orphan activities dangling that seem only relevant on a single maturity level. As an example, we discuss code signing in version 1.5. Well, let's take a closer look at one of the security practices, the requirements-driven testing under verification business function. The goal of the requirements-driven testing practice is to ensure that implemented security controls operate as expected and satisfy project's stated security requirements. Requirements-driven testing security practice is divided into 2 streams, control verification and misuse or abuse testing. Control verification verifies that the application security controls satisfy stated security requirements and validates their correct functioning. These requirements are typically functional in nature. Negative testing addresses the quality of the implementation of the security controls and aims to detect unexpected design flaws in implementation bugs through misuse and abuse testing. These streams align and link activities in the practice over different maturity levels. Each stream has an objective to be reached, and this objective is being reached in the increasing levels of maturity. It does so by incrementally building set of security test and regression cases and executing them regularly through automation. The key word here is automation. In its most advanced forms, the practice promotes security stress testing, such as denial of service, and strives to continuously improve application security by consistently automating security unit test cases and automating security regression test cases for all bugs identified and fixed. Let's take a look at secure build under implementation. This practice focuses on creating consistently repeatable secure build process and accounting for the security of application dependencies. The secure build practice emphasizes the importance of building software in a standardized, repeatable manner, and of doing so using secure components, including third-party software dependencies. The first stream focuses on removing any subjectivity from the build process by striving for full automation. An automated build pipeline can include additional automated security checks such as static analysis and dynamic analysis to gain further assurance and flag security regressions early by failing the build, for example. Now, we are not recommending that from the get-go, everybody should start failing the build. In fact, it's reserved for the more mature organizations who have weeded out all the false positives earlier, and they have high confidence on their security checks, such as static and dynamic analysis. Then only we recommend setting some threshold and criteria to fail the build. But from the beginning, you should not start failing the build for security issues. The second stream acknowledges the prevalence of software dependencies in modern applications. It aims to identify them and track their security status in order to contain the impact of their insecurity on otherwise rather secure application. In a most advanced form, it applies similar security checks to software dependencies as to the application itself. Now, let's look at the second security practice, secure deployment under implementation. Now, this practice focuses on automatically securing deployments through the production environment and all required secrets. One of the final stages in delivering secure software is ensuring the security and integrity of the developed applications are not compromised during their deployment. To this end, the practice's first stream focuses on removing manual error by automating the deployment process as much as possible and making its success contingent upon outcomes of integrated security verification checks. It also fosters separation of duties by making adequately trained and non-developer responsible for deployment. The second stream goes beyond the mechanics of deployment and focuses on protecting the privacy and integrity of sensitive data, such as passwords, tokens, and other secrets required for applications to operate in production environments. In its simplest form, suitable production secrets are moved from repositories and config files into adequately managed digital vaults. In most advanced forms, secrets are dynamically generated at deployment time and routinely processes detect and mitigate the presence of any unprotected secrets in the environment. My goal is to arm all of you with the knowledge so that you can apply OWASP SAMM 2.0 starting literally Monday. So let's look at how to apply this model. A typical approach rolling out SAMM 2.0 model includes implementing these 6 phases in continuous fashion, thus creating more like a life cycle approach. And each iteration of a cycle you are increasing your level of maturity for security assurance in several aspects. Before we do that, we need to spend some time in preparation. This phase is the most critical phase for success of OWASP SAMM application in your organization. I've witnessed several organizations who skipped this phase, which resulted in derailing their efforts for rolling out SAMM. So this is the most important phase in my mind. It consists of following 4 activities. Defining the scope. First thing you need to identify is if you would like to roll out OWASP SAMM across the whole organization, across a particular business unit, or at an individual application or project level. Once you define the scope, you need to identify key stakeholders and get their buy-in. Once you get key stakeholder buy-in, you should start spreading the word and evangelize SAMM activities. Now, communication is the key here. So if you really want this implementation to be successful, identify who are your key stakeholders and get their buy-in. Without that, it is very difficult to roll out OWASP SAMM. To measure the current level of maturity, after you get the buy-in, first thing you would do is you start measuring current level of maturity across your software development lifecycle. In order to measure this current level of maturity, you need to start with an assessment by conducting interviews with key stakeholders to evaluate current security practices. We recommend in-person interviews versus sending over email or Slack messages. This way you can explain the key intent behind an activity and clarify any potential doubts they might have. Now, there are 3 ways in which you could perform assessment: a lightweight assessment, detailed assessment, and hybrid assessment. The lightweight assessment is simply interviewing key stakeholders and recording their response, not validating whatever they are saying. So that's why it's kind of very efficient, but it's a lightweight assessment. The accuracy is not great during lightweight assessment. During detailed assessment, while it's the most accurate assessment, you ask for evidence for performance and quality of each activity being performed. So it takes a little bit more cost. In hybrid assessment, you ask for evidence on a need-to-know basis for some of the activities and not for all activities. I personally use hybrid assessment. In my experience, if you are performing a SAMM assessment internally, hybrid assessment is the most effective way of performing assessment. However, if you are involving an external AppSec consulting firm to perform an assessment, detailed assessment is more appropriate. Now, some organizations perform very detailed assessment during the first iteration and perform very lightweight or hybrid assessment during subsequent SAMM assessments. Once you record the responses, you can assign maturity levels using SAMM worksheet that we have provided. Now let's look at how to calculate maturity score. Finally, we came up with a new scoring model, which will still primarily based on the coverage. However, we added a quality criteria for each question to add another dimension to the score. Our guidance is to score 0 if quality criteria are not met. Going back to one of the SAMM core principles we discussed earlier of simplicity, we decided to add quality criteria for each question. This way, time to complete an assessment did not significantly increase with SAMM 2.0. The overall maturity score for the security practice is calculated by taking average of maturity level 1 across stream A and stream B, and adding that to level 2 and level 3. Now, once you finish an assessment, you need to define the target as per your organization's business drivers and risk profile. As I mentioned earlier, it is very important to spend some time understanding your organization's business drivers and risk profile during this exercise. Once you define the target, the most important step is to estimate the cost of implementation. Many SAMM initiatives fail when folks forget to estimate and plan increased cost of implementation, resulting in lack of resources dedicated to security improvements that they plan for. The cost of implementation now would become direct input into the defining of the plan or plan definition. During this phase, you need to determine change schedule as per upcoming releases and develop and update your roadmap plan over the next 4 or 5 phases. We recommend implementing SAM change over minimum 3 phases and maximum of 5 phases. Each phase can span between 3 to 4 months up to 12 months. In order to focus on the highest impact, you should start with high impact security improvements at the beginning, such as training and awareness, threat assessment. Once plan is defined, start implementation. Implement activities using SAM 2.0 guide. Leverage other OWASP projects as well. SAM aspires to be an umbrella project for all OWASP projects. That means each OWASP project can map back to one of the SAM business functions and security practices. Now, here are some example OWASP projects and how they map back to various SAM business functions. OWASP Juice Shop and Security Shepherd map to the governance business function, which helps with the training and awareness aspects. There are several resources available for different phases of implementation business functions, such as OWASP Security Knowledge Framework, Secure Coding Dojo, and things like that. There are several resources available for also for verification business functions. One of the most popular one is the security testing guide, and both it has the normal for the web application as well as for the mobile application. In terms of the tooling, OWASP ZAP is the most popular security testing tool. So you can leverage all these various OWASP projects in order to help with the implementation. Last but not least, Mod Security Rule Set is a project which really is useful for operations business function. And if you can look at things like projects like OWASP Top 10 and OWASP Mobile Top 10, they can actually map back to multiple of OWASP SAMM business functions and practices. After the implementation, we need to create and update scorecards on regular interval by capturing scores from before and after an iteration of an assurance program build out, and communicate progress to the management. I cannot stress enough on communication to the senior management here. I've used these scorecards to demonstrate and communicate security improvements to the highest level of management, the companies that I work for. This helps management visualize the progress in overall security improvements, which results in even more support rolling out next phase of security improvements. That is why this is the most crucial phase of implementation of OWASP SAMM. There are some of the other available resources we have to get you started using SAM 2.0. All these resources are linked to the OWASPSAMM.org website. If you don't remember anything, just remember this one website. All resources are linked to this website. I highly recommend reviewing OWASP SAMM Quick Start Guide before you start adopting SAMM. SAMM Toolkit now has both Microsoft Spreadsheet and Google Docs versions, which helps performing SAMM assessment for both Microsoft Shops and Google Shops, right? Earlier, we only had this toolkit available in Microsoft Spreadsheet format. So you can take use of this both Google Docs as well as Microsoft Spreadsheet for conducting assessments, building a roadmap and plans. I would also like to point out that Concord USA, which is one of our sponsors, has contributed an online SAMM calculator. And one of the community members, Satish, has also created online SAMM 2.0 dashboard. Together, they provide an online equivalent of SAMM Toolkit. For those of you who are already using SAMM 1.5, we have provided a mapping guide from SAMM 1.5 to SAMM 2.0. If you have any feedback on these resources, please use SAMM assessment feature request form. Now, one more thing before we conclude this talk. We recently introduced SAMM Benchmark Initiative, which helps answer the question, how do I compare to other organizations? SAMM Benchmark Initiative is inspired by BSIMM. The goal of this project is to collect the most comprehensive data set related to organizational maturity of application or software security programs from both the self-assessing organizations and AppSec consultancies. They're both anonymized and verified data collection options depending on your comfort level. We totally understand that there are several organizations, they respect privacy, and we also respect privacy of those organizations. That is why we have created an option to submit your assessment results and the data anonymously. As someone said, proof of the pudding is it in eating. So if you haven't yet, I really invite you to please start using OWASP SAMM 2.0 starting next Monday. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to come to BSides Toronto in person next year to discuss the lessons learned. If you have any questions, always contact me at my email or hit me up on LinkedIn, connect with me, and I can also help provide any questions you might have. I'd like to thank BSides Toronto organizers, volunteers, and sponsors for putting together this great BSides conference in Toronto. Looking forward to visiting in person next year. And for those of you who might not know me, I'm from Toronto. I still have my house there. So it's always kind of like a great feeling coming back home. So thank you very much to all of you for listening to this talk. And if you have any questions, I'll be available on Discord.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, there are some questions that have come in. We're just going to have to wrap up, unfortunately, here. But from my own personal experience, I got to say that this is where, AppSec hits real life and gets real results. So thank you very much for the talk. I appreciate it. And we're going to wrap up for now. Again, thanks again for coming and giving the talk.